is a filmmaker and he's passionate about it, and he'll do the same thing.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Out of Nowhere. Well, my special guest today is Trey Hudson. Now, Trey, I think it was about 3 years ago, last time he was on the show. So we'll be talking about maybe Return to the Meadow, a book that he's got out. Fascinating book. All will be revealed today. He'll have lots to tell us about what's happened since he last on the show. So, and the phenomena don't go away. It's always be there. So, how are you then, Trey?
Oh, I'm great. I'm great. If I was any better, I'd spontaneously combust. I would just, yeah, life is good. I've, like I was telling you earlier, I've retired, from the U.S. federal government. So I went ahead and hung up my spurs, and I'm a retired guy now. Strangely enough, I'm busier now than I was when I was working full time. So I've got a very active speaking schedule around the U.S. and I've got a couple of books out now. Have a film that's has been out about the Meadow project. So working on some other projects like I was telling you with some other people that we know, and it's it's a good time to be alive. Just staying busy, and I'm like everybody else. I'm really excited to see what comes out of this potential disclosure about UAP, UFO, and NHI information that may come out here in the future. A lot of speculation on that. So it's it's like the Chinese the Chinese blessing. May you live in interesting times, and I certainly think we're there.
I think we do as well. What inspired you to write The Return to the Meadow?
Well, basically, the title says it all. It's a return to the meadow. We when I ended the first book, which the time period that book ended was about 2020. That was about the investigations in the last few chapters. We didn't stop there. The Meadow is one of those just unique places that just keeps on giving, and the phenomena evolves. It's not static, and which is something that's really really cool when you start looking at it through the optics of like maybe NHI, non-human intelligence, that we've established a rapport with whatever it is, and so the phenomena has evolved in amazing, remarkable, and incredibly unexpected ways. And so once again, I had this, this stack of data, all these reams of reports and experiences. And once again, I came to the realization, this isn't my story. This isn't my event. This belongs to the world. The world should read this, digest it, and make up their own mind. So I went ahead and published my second book. Now, my publisher was Philip Mantle, and he got out of the publishing business because of some health issues, which I understand he's doing a lot better now, which is good for him.
Yeah.
So I ended up publishing with, and this is kind of fortuitous and very interesting, is with Mr. Ryan Skinner. And if anybody knows who Ryan Skinner is, he's literally the man who wrote the book on Skinwalker Ranch. He wrote some of the first books talking about the Sherman Ranch back in the early 2000s. So, he and I got together and published our Return to the Meadow. So basically it talks about our adventures up until last year. And the neat thing is the adventures are still continuing. There's amazing stuff that has happened even after that book was published.
When you talk about that, is Return to the Meadow based on personal experiences?
Yeah, it's based on personal experiences and the experiences of my team. Now, I broke it down into 3 sections. I started, as I talked to more people throughout the, all over the world, I learned that there are other places, similar to the Meadow, very similar. And so I look at several, in the first part of the book, the part is called Congruences, part 1. And I look at some famous places here in the U.S. that are similar to the Meadow. And of course, everybody's familiar with Skinwalker Ranch, so I didn't address that. But I talked about Marley Woods. I talked about the Stardust Ranch. I talked about the, and I don't know if you're familiar with Katy Page in Colorado, the Clearview Ranch. And I talked about, I said Marley Woods. the Bradshaw Ranch.
Bradshaw, right?
So I really dig down into those, into those locations and had a chapter on each. So, and then I have like a graph at the end of the chapter that talks about some of the phenomena that happens at all of these different places, and there seems to be correlations. The second part of the book is called Explorations, and that's basically our adventures, in the Meadow Project, things that we've experienced. And the last part, part 3, is called Revelations, and these are some really interesting things that I did. I was able to bring a hypnotherapist and psychotherapist onto our staff with the Anomalous Studies and Observation Group, and he actually did some hypnotic regressions with some of our ASOG members. And some of the things that came out of that were absolutely breathtaking, just startling, amazing things came out of that. And then I also go into some different theories, some of my own personal experiences, things like, the dogman phenomena, hitchhiker effect. I have another chapter on health effects, and all of that is in the third part called Revelations. So, I wanted to try to be reasonable about this book, but when I ended up, it was like 356 pages. So I apologize for the length, but there's I think a lot of cool stuff in there. And, I'm really proud that the book is out there, and I'm really proud to be working with Ryan Skinner to help publish it.
There's pockets that, like you said, there's pockets of interest in lots of places around the world.
Yeah.
Like we go to Bempton Cliffs.
Right.
And that's a bird sanctuary. But lots of things happen up there. People don't realise, bird watchers just look for birds. They're not interested in looking for the sky or looking in the sea or looking on elsewhere. But it's amazing what things appear just out of the blue.
And you hit on something really interesting. And this is, we've run into this in our research, is we all have what we call a normalcy bias. We look at the world through a sense of optics, and we know we basically have a definition, a metric of what is normal. And we go through life, and if something happens that's outside of our definition of normal, we tend to ignore it. So your bird watchers probably have experienced some really amazing stuff out there, but since it's outside of their normalcy bias, their normalcy box, they just discount it. And, we had an amazing event, out in the meadow where, one of my team members caught a large creature of some kind walking through the meadow. And of course, we talked about previously about the portal or the box thing that we had encountered. And so I was really excited when he was telling me about this, picking up this creature on the thermal. I said, "Oh, hey Lee, that's fantastic. You have it on video, right?" And he's like, "No." And I'm like, "Why? You can record stuff on your thermal. Why didn't you hit record?" And he goes, "I thought it was a bear or a giant feral pig." And I'm like,
God.
Lee, there were 12 people surrounding this 8-acre opening, this 8-acre field. What animal in its right mind would go through a field surrounded by 12 humans? And he's like, "Oh no, I didn't record it." And I said, "Yeah, do you remember reading about the events at Skinwalker Ranch and Bigelow's team when the thing came out of the opening and slinked along the ground?" And he goes, "Oh, I am so sorry." And I'm like, you were living in your normalcy box. You saw something. You're like, "Oh, well, that's a giant feral hog or a bear or something. That's normal. So I'm not going to record it." So yeah, it happens to the best of us. But
I was going to say, because I think we were at Bempton quite a few years ago, and I think there were 5 or 6 of us, and these lights were kept appearing, and not one person got flicked and recorded it.
Yeah,
they were just fascinated by the light. And 2 of them were senior photographers who make films for a living.
That's happened to me. I mean, sometimes I'll just be. I remember we had a really neat UFO sighting, and I'm like, "Oh, that's just amazing," and I looked, and there's like, my night vision camera sitting right there next to me, and I didn't even think about picking it up. So, it happens to us. But, you were talking about the bird sanctuary out there. Wasn't that a former RAF facility?
Yeah, it was an underground one.
Right. Yeah.
All
But
them years ago. It was used after it dismantled all them
mhm.
years ago. Satanic people used it for quite a
Oh.
while.
Hmm.
We don't know if the village was involved with it at that time. I just can't say, like, but things were happening, but we don't know what they used it for. Did they
Okay.
did they manifest something to come out of there?
Yeah, and that's where things get interesting, and I'm also hearing rumblings, throughout the community that, that there is an occult and there's like an occult layer to this whole UFO NHI thing that's been around for a while. So that's kind of that's kind of scary, to think that, there might be some sort of occult nexus to some of this stuff.
Yeah, and it's true. Rich got a question here. Strange. Ah, right. Trey, you have it's all wrong. All the phenomena originates from one civilization, another group of humans from another planet, Earth. We have parasitic form of human species feeding on us. That's from
Well,
Rick Allen.
yeah, perhaps. I don't know. If somebody, takes the big knit comb and combs through Earth, maybe we're the lice that come out of the knit, we're their parasites. I don't know. And that's one thing I tell people is this is all guesswork. If anybody tells you that they have the answer, they're either a fool or they're lying to you, because this is anybody's best guess.
Of course it is. What was the most challenging part of writing the book?
This is going to sound rather pedestrian, but I'm a lazy writer. Is I will sit there in front of my computer knowing what I'm going to write. I have my outline done, and it's just making myself do it. Just making myself take these experiences. It was not from a lack of information or lack of material. I have tons of that. It's just making myself do it. Uh, but probably, other than just being a lazy writer, yeah, it's probably trying to take these amazing circumstances, these amazing happenings, these amazing phenomena, and recountings of these experiences, and actually put them in some sort of cohesive, linear, pseudo linear form where people can read it and it makes sense. It's trying to tie all this together to make it into a story that just doesn't sound completely stupid and disjointed.
What's the strangest story somebody's told you about the Meadow or
Hmm.
Bradshaw Ranch?
Uh oh, Bradshaw Ranch is full of all kinds of crazy stuff. I corresponded a little bit with Tom Donga, who wrote the book Merging Dimensions,
Yeah.
and they had some things where they would go out to the ranch there at Bradshaw, and they would just randomly take a flash camera. Now, I think they were using. I'm trying to remember if they were using early digital cameras or 35 millimeters at that time. I don't recall, but they would just take photographs just at night, just randomly point and shoot, and the flash would go off. And then when they would get the photographs back, there would be people, entities standing inside of that photograph, that they had captured on film when they were the only ones there. So that's really kind of cool, because that kind of dovetails into some of the work, unfortunately, that has happened after I wrote the second book. Is I've been working with the Stephen Leah, who is runs an outfit called Hidden Worlds Quantum Imagery, and folks might have seen him on the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch or the Secret of Blind Frog Ranch, those shows. And what he
Oh, yeah.
specializes is
Yeah.
Stephen will take still photographs and extrapolate data using a proprietary process out of the photographs that shows like a quantum lattice that exists, in these photographs. That kind of makes sense. There's a theory that everything that was, is, or will exists in a quantum field all around us. And so he started doing that with some of the still photography that we captured when we were filming our movie in 2020, November of 2024. And the stuff that came out of some of his analysis were actual faces and creatures and things that existed just beyond our three-dimensional understanding. And he was doing it as a double blind analysis. He did not know anything about the Meadow project. He didn't know about our work and our and some of our experiments. But while we were doing a God helmet experiment with one of our members, Stephen was coming up with imagery and data of faces inside of boxes and cubes surrounding this individual while he was undergoing a God helmet session back at base camp. So, kind of like, Tom Dongo and his crew caught these images unexpectedly. We've done the same thing, albeit through quantum analysis of some of our still imagery.
Yeah.
And that goes back to some of the concerns that people are putting out there today. I was just reading an article this morning about disclosure, that there is a religious and spiritual element to it that may be very disturbing to a lot of people. So, based on what I've seen and what I've experienced, I think that's a very, very valid concern that some people may be completely freaked out by it.
Exactly. Do you think has the phenomenon changed any
Yeah.
time through writing your book?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It started off as basically that sounds kind of weird in this field, but it started off basically as disembodied voices, orbs, in the woods, the lights, like kind of like y'all experience.
Yeah.
And every once in a while we'd have something amazing like the portal or the cube would happen. But basically orbs, disembodied voices, and shadow people is what we would encounter. Well, since then we've actually been able to capture one of these shadow people on video. Well, I was filming another documentary there, so we actually had a shadow person move across the background while we were filming. People are being touched, which is really neat. And now we're starting to move into almost like psychic stuff. I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but I'll give you an example of it. I referred to the thing slinking across the field that my thermal operator failed to capture. Well, that night we had a brand new potential members come out, and it was a Mr. Shea Hudson, no relation to me, and his wife Christy, and he's my psychotherapist and hypnotherapist. And he's licensed. That's what he does for a living.
Yeah.
And they had gone out with one of my senior researchers, and were sitting up on top of a ridge. And Christy, the new member, she said, I don't feel comfortable here. I'm uncomfortable. I feel like something is slinking along and watching us. And, it's just kind of like Gollum, out of Tolkien's books, slinking along and just kind of menacing us from afar. She said, is it okay if we go back with the larger group? And my senior researcher says, yeah, it's fine. We don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable. That's not, that's just not what we're about. So they decided to come back down off of this ridge, and myself and another guy who happens to be a filmmaker, Greg Ogles, are watching their headlights move down across, this ridge. And right below them, we see an orb that's pacing them just out of their sight, kind of like what she just described. So she gets back to the group, and we continue the investigation throughout the night. Nothing remarkable happened. She and her husband go back to their tent and retire. But while they're asleep, she has a dream. And in that dream, and I'm getting some notes here. In that dream, she dreams that the top of their tent becomes translucent, and a woman and a teenage boy are standing there looking at her. And they take her and her husband up into a room that has like a big white board on it. And the woman writes some symbols on the board, and then she falls back asleep. So the next morning, they came over to me as I was cooking my breakfast, and they said, hey, Trey, Christy had this dream, and, we want to tell you about it. And so they told me the dream, and she told me about the symbols, and she drew me a picture of the symbols. And I'm going to show you right here. Yeah, those were the symbols that she drew. That's actually a scan of her
Oh, yeah, I
drawing.
can see that. Yeah.
And so I asked her, I said, okay, before I give you what I think this might be, I'm going to ask you some questions. Are you familiar with my work? And she goes, no. I said, have you ever heard me on a podcast? No. Have you ever read the Meadow Project or listened to an audio book on that? No. Do you have any knowledge of the symbolism on early American, Central American, and international petroglyphs and pictographs, significant, specifically the spiral? And she says, no. I said, well, it's interesting that the symbol that came up in your dream was a spiral, because that usually has been used, especially here in Central North America and Central America, as a symbol denoting a pathway or gateway to another place. It was a shamanic symbol that they would use to denote ascending up into some other realm, some other state of consciousness. And it was interesting that one of the symbols was a squared off spiral, because the gateway or portal that we had experienced back in 2017 was in the form of a box or a cube, i.e., squared off. She knew nothing about this. So now it looks like that she is starting to, or this phenomena is starting to communicate with us, perhaps through our dreams. Which, if you remember back in the first book, I talk about the two words that were downloaded to a team member, Nox Magby, which turned out to be the Nox, the Roman goddess of night, and Magby from Old English Magba, meaning kindred or children, means children of the night goddess. And that came to my team member right after we had done a CE5 protocol the night before. Children of the night goddess can be interpreted as the Greys. So it looks like we're starting to have this communication once again through dreams or psychically, which is not something that I really expected. And you remember her talking about something slinking around and following them. The next night was a night that my team member saw on his thermal the creature slinking along, just like she described, through the meadow. So not only is it possible it may be dreams, but it might be causing a bit of precognition, on people's parts, that they can, predict things that might happen in this, in this area. So that's really cool. And like I said, we had done the some of the amazing work with the God helmet, developed by Michael Persinger back in the 80s. Had some neat stuff come out of that. We did capture, while we were filming our movie in 2024, another creature slinking around, there in the meadow. And MUFON had agreed very graciously to do an analysis of that film. And they use some of the same quantum imagery processes that Stephen Leah does. And the analyst came back with me, goes, why am I seeing like a sharp edge? When I start extrapolating data out of it, I see a sharp edge. Is something else there? I said, yeah, the sharp edge is where the cube was back in 2017. So you have to wonder if the creature that we filmed on thermal in 2024 was something that had come out of the cube, which still exists in a quantum form just outside of this dimension. So, you start really looking at stuff, from that optic, it gets really pretty damn weird pretty quick. And so, obviously I'm really excited about some of these things. And then, of course, you have the hitchhiker phenomena. One of the things that I had encountered personally after, some work in the meadow is much like in Marley Woods, also like at Skinwalker Ranch, 40 yards from where I'm sitting right now, is I encountered canine tracks that were 6 inches in diameter. Now, 6 inches is about that wide, huge, massive things. The track line was bipedal. Starts in a very distinct spot, goes a distance, and then disappears. That's the dogman phenomena, or the hitchhiker phenomena, which people have described, not only occurring at these places of high strange, like y'all have, out at the cliffs. But
Mm.
also, people have experienced this at their homes. There's a very, very famous case with one of the National Institute for Discovery Institute scientist Bigelow had hired to work out at Skinwalker Ranch. His family seeing these large upright canines outside of their suburban Virginia home, just outside of D.C. So that's something that's kind of new. That's kind of cool. And then one of the things that's really remarkable is there's another location in another state that I investigate with a affiliate group, which is primarily a Bigfoot group.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of the same members, so everybody kind of knows each other. But we had a team out there, and they had a situation where their entire environment changed. It's like the environment that they were sitting in didn't exist anymore. And it was so unnerving to them that they had to call for help. And when the first team member got to them, they were so disoriented. The first questions out of their mouth is, "Are you real?" They didn't
Oh,
even know if they were still with us.
all right.
And so you go back and you read some of the stuff, some of the accounts. One of the best things I can think of is Dr. Simeon Hines, wrote the book Dark Matter Monsters. He talks about, some of this strange, phenomena happening around Bigfoot. But what's interesting is one of the individuals that was in that team on that Bigfoot hunting expedition was one of the ASOG members who's done a lot of work at the Meadow. So, I started looking at it, through those lenses, and I'm like, is the phenomena following us now? Is the Meadow no longer the key? Is the key now the people that have experienced the Meadow? And it's kind of like if you're at a party and you go say hi to somebody at this party and you develop a rapport,
Mm.
and then you're in town later on, 2 weeks later, the person's liable to come up and say hi to you in a totally new environment. So we have to wonder, is that's what's happening to us now, that we're starting to have these experiences away from the Meadow, which is what people call the hitchhiker effect, that it actually follows you around.
That's
So,
right.
so
Have you
kind of,
ever have you ever witnessed hitchhiker effect yourself?
yeah, I've actually had things, appear and disappear, at my home. And I'm not talking about like an aport, but I'll put something down, I'll turn around and do something, I'll look and it's gone. And I'll absolutely tear my hair out trying to find it, go to bed, wake up the next morning, come back down, and the place where I put it, it has reappeared. I've had
Yes.
that happen. And I've had the large canine tracks in my backyard. So yeah, I've experienced that. I've had other team members, experience it. Uh, I've had other cinematographers come down who are working on some documentaries that had stuff follow them home. I actually have one cinematographer that will not go back to the Meadow. He refuses to ever go back because of some of the stuff he's experienced.
Yeah. Another question from Rick Allen.
Mhm.
Sasquatch and the dogmen are the ground forces of alien humans. They are getting into place for the big UFO reveal.
Yeah, that is a really great point, because if you go back and you look at some of the earlier luminaries in this field, and I'm talking like Brad Steiger, uh, uh, Keel, some of those guys, even all the way back to Mr. Fort, is there seems to be some sort of correlation between you know cryptids, Bigfoot, Dogman, blah blah blah, UFOs, ghosts. All of this seems to be interrelated, especially in places of geoconcentrations of high strangeness, the Meadow, uh, Skinwalker Ranch, Marley Woods, all those places, Stardust Ranch, all of those places. So I've been, doing some thought experiments, and what I wonder, because I'm starting to look at things, I've always kind of looked at it interdimensionally, and actually use a term in my first book that I coined called paradimensionals. I think these things are paradimensionals, i.e., they exist somewhere other than here. And looking at the many worlds theory and some other, quantum theory, is it possible that these things exist in all of their various forms, be they aliens, UFO, Bigfoot, ghost, the Fae, hobgoblins, whatever, Baba Yaga, whatever mythology you can imagine, that all of these archetypes exist at once until we observe them. This goes back to the observer effect, quantum observer effect. And when we observe them, the waveform of all of these collapse except one. And that's what you experience. So, a person who's like a Bigfoot guy, or a Bigfoot gal, this phenomena, they encounter this phenomena, and when they observe it or their equipment observes it, all the waveforms collapse except Bigfoot, because that's kind of the feel they're putting onto it. UFOologists might see a UFO or a gray. A occultist might see, the Jinn or something like that. Crowley might see an elemental, somebody that's, an OTO person that studies Aleister Crowley. A very religious person might see an angel or a devil, So that's a theory that I'm kind of working on, kind of trying to think through, is that these waveforms all exist simultaneously until we apply the observer effect, and everything collapses except one. And that's what we actually see. And that's why, you have such, gnashing of teeth between the different genres and the different areas of high strangeness, and everybody thinking that they're right, when in fact, all of them might be right and all of them might be wrong at the same time.
Yeah, when you've been to places, have you ever felt as though you've been pulled back sometimes?
Yeah, you have to wonder how much of this is, perhaps just our own ego speaking. Is I will always have an affinity for the Meadow, because that's really where I earned my spurs as what I call a weird crapologist, someone who studies weird crap. That's kind of where, it really came to fruition for me. It's also a place where a lot of people had their conceptions of the universe changed. But, I'm one of those kind of guys, I kind of, take it as it comes. I, I'm drawn to that. I'm also drawn to Katie Page's Clearview Ranch. I've been out there, albeit for just a very short time, but I want to go out there and do some investigation. I think that's a very significant area. And you can walk into these places, and sometimes it reverberates with you. You just know in your guts that it's important. And so those are two of the places that, really, are really, really important for me, is, the ranch out there in Colorado, which I hope to one day be able to get back out there and do some serious investigation, and also the Meadow.
Yeah, another from Philip the Fish. Trey, what's an experience that was absolutely terrifying in the moment, but completely hilarious in the hindsight once you realized what was actually happening?
Well, that's a great one. This is a fantastic story, and it's a kind of a cautionary tale that, even somebody who, knows a little bit about this stuff can fall into their own trap. Is we were actually doing some research on some areas probably about a mile from the Meadow, but they were also openings in the woods. And we had some pretty amazing experiences there. We had team members that were physically touched by something, something actually touched them. And so we were all really excited about that. It's like, okay, this phenomena is now evolved to touching, physical manifestation of a touch, which was exciting. And I have a set of military grade night vision that I use. And I have them mounted on a helmet that I can drop down, and I can walk and move around with them.
Brilliant. Yeah.
So I'm scanning around with my night vision, and I see a glow, a very faint glow, off in the distance. And this faint glow was very close to an area where I had an experience back in the 90s of this strange apparition while I was backpacking with a friend of mine. So it was like in a very, very, very close location to that. So I was excited about that. And so I tell one of my teammates, I said, okay, let's go up there and check this out. So we're moving very quietly through the woods. Like, so, he's looking on his thermal. I'm looking through night vision, and we're creeping through the woods, and we get to where we can see the ambient light of this object, with our naked eye. So I
Yeah.
pop the night vision up, and we creep up on it, and we get within about 75 meters of it. And what we're seeing is a dome, a lit dome, like a hubcap, sitting on the ground. And around this dome, we see figures moving. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't believe what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a friggin' UFO on the ground with figures moving around. And I'm starting to get really excited about this because this is breathtaking stuff.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought, okay, so I dropped my night vision so I can really get a good look at it. And I'm looking, and I'm like, that seems familiar, that imagery. And then I realized what I was seeing is two backpackers inside of a dome tent cooking their supper. And it was illuminating the inside of the dome tent.
Yeah, right.
And that's what it was. So, I look back on it now and it's like, yeah, that's a funny story because, we really thought we had, we found an actual UFO on the ground, but it was, it was just some guys, cooking up their ramen noodles while they're hiking.
Another question here from Philip. You have talked about portals in the past. If these locations are thinning points between worlds, what do you think the other side thinks of us poking around with thermal cameras and recording?
Yeah, that's a good question. A couple of ways to look at that is whatever the others, the NHI, whatever they're doing, it might have absolutely nothing to do with us. Like if I'm out on my property, I have 8 acres, and I'm digging a post hole, like to put up a post or something.
Yeah.
And let's say 10 feet away from me, there's an ant hill, right? And I said the ants can see me digging this post hole. I could care less about the ants. They have absolutely nothing to do with what I'm doing. I've got a task. They're so below me, I don't even consider them. So I always have to wonder if these NHI, or the others even care about us, if we're even relevant. Now, the other hand of that is, and I'll use an analogy, is imagine some workmen are repairing a sidewalk, and they're out there with their cement and their trowels, and they're smoothing out the sidewalk. And this little kid comes up, and he's kind of a little jabbery kid, the little kid that, is always, jabbering and talking and being annoying and all that. And this kid comes up and he starts asking these guys questions like, oh, what are you doing? How long are you going to be here? What is that stuff? What does that thing do? Blah, 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 blah. Really annoying. And the workmen have 3 options. Number one, they can just ignore the kid and continue with their mission, which is to repair this section of sidewalk.
Yeah.
Number 2, they could look at the kid and be like, get out of here. Scare the kid off, right? Or number 3, they may just decide to humor the kid and engage with them in a little bit. We're the children. We're the little kid with our cameras and recorders and all of this stuff. The entities are doing whatever it is they're doing. Now, whether they decide to interact with us or frighten us off or ignore us is on their terms. And we just have to take what comes.
Another question here. These are all places where you are lured into seeking, like the Meadow, Cannock Chase, Bempton Cliffs, all vocal points for deception of humans. They are manipulation, or they care about us.
I don't know if they care about us or not. I have to kind of, and I've, discussed this back and forth with some people. Some people I talk to, they quickly want to put the demonic label on it. What you're dealing with or what you encounter is evil. Anything, that's not of this particular ilk is evil. I say you got to be careful doing that. Just because you don't understand something, you don't necessarily need to label it evil. Are they manipulating us? I don't know. Or would we be smart enough to know if we're being manipulated? I just take the data as it comes, and then I put it out there for people to make up their own minds. I always tell people before you get into this, and I'm not talking about, going out and sitting in your backyard with a pair of binoculars. I'm talking about really getting in and researching this stuff. You have to have a belief system. Now, I'm not going to tell you what belief system to have, but you need to have a belief system because you need to be grounded in something. And that helps keep you from being manipulated and helps keep you from being drawn astray, from whatever these forces are. And then other than that, like I said, I just take the data as it comes, and report it out there and let people make up their own mind.
Yeah, you've talked about getting your camera out and taking photos instantly all the time. I've been told that as well because I've seen some. I've got photos back, and I thought, my God, I never saw that.
Yeah,
with my own eyes, but I've got it on camera now.
And I have to wonder if, maybe as we, mature in this, that there are things that we look at and just count, but we look at them through a more mature, set of eyes, more mature in our research and say, oh, wait, okay, I didn't notice that before. That's very peculiar. And that's what I found is I'm maturing, as I go through this journey, is there are things I think today that I didn't think 2 years ago or didn't know enough to think of. So, it's very much a journey, and you have to be, very open-minded and, look at it as a trek of, enlightenment, if you will,
Trey, when you talk about going to places like that, do you think some of us are chosen to see things like other people? You might say to somebody, look at that up there. And they go, where? I can't see anything. Some people.
Yeah.
Do you think so? Do you think some of us are chosen to see things?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. We, as adults, we get into that stinky part of life called adulting where, we have bills to pay. We have jobs, we have to worry about healthcare. We have to, worry about all this other crap. And we don't have a chance to wonder. The wonder in the world is gone because we've been jaded. We're very cynical. And we have had our whole lives people telling us, oh, you didn't see that. No, you made that up. The bump in the night you heard was, the house settling. I've had so many people come up to me and tell me, when I was a kid, I would have these experiences and my parents would tell me, oh, that's, you saw a bear, or, that was the wind blowing through the trees, or that was a reflection on the window. When they get older, they start looking at those things through a different set of optics, and they're like, oh, okay, now I know that now that I've matured a little bit, that the world's a lot stranger than I was told. And, perhaps I was having legitimate experiences when I was younger.
What are you looking into in the future then?
In the future, what I'm looking at is I've got some side projects that I'm doing with some other folks that I'm not really, quite ready to, go out there in the public yet. We're going to continue using the God helmet, which is kind of exciting, and perhaps some more film projects. The Meadow project film is I was very pleased with the way that came out. A lot of neat stuff in that film. So perhaps some future film projects, lecturing, and going to start looking at things out there in places other than the Meadow. Since this stuff seems to be following us around, I'm going to be very curious to see, as we research other areas that have a folklore, if they're going to be supercharged. The areas are going to allow our phenomena to be supercharged where it can actually follow us. So we've had, like I said, one instance of that happen. So I'm kind of curious to see how that evolves, in the future. And I always have the good old Meadow to go back to. It's just always a very, very
interesting,
very interesting place. And if nothing else, I get to spend good times with good people, and I get to meet people, and I get to talk to people. So, I always tell people if I'm somewhere, at an event or something, come up and say hi. I love to talk to people and listen to their experiences and learn from them.
Well, did you ever go to Bradshaw Ranch then?
No, I have not been to Bradshaw Ranch. That's on my list of places to go. Unfortunately, like everybody else, I'm self-funded, so it costs quite a bit of money to to go out and visit these places. I've been able to get out to a few places, but have not made it to Bradshaw yet.
When you talk about, I think we've always talked about psychic mediums getting involved with going to places now, like Meadow at the
Mhm.
Meadow. I think and the paranormal. I think we've all got something there. What helps the others?
Yeah, I think I'm not a psychic. I'm a coordinate remote viewer, which is way away from being psychic. I think that these places are special for a reason. What that particular reason is, I don't know. There are, in Gaelic folklore, there are places where they call the thinning, which is where the reality is thin. You know, especially there in the British Isles, they talk a lot about these special places. I think they're all over the world. I think people are drawn to them, for whatever reason. You can just walk into an area and tell that it's special. And I think that as you have people with different talents, they're going to experience these areas differently. Psychic might experience something very unique to their specialty, their talent, where a empirical researcher might experience something very different, where an artist, a visual artist, might experience something different. And it's one of those true, what I found, especially working with my team, it's one of those gestalt things where the whole of their experiences is greater than the total of their individual experiences. You have to look at it very holistically. And that's where the magic really starts to happen, when you start looking at all the experiences holistically and then sprinkle maybe a little bit of empirical data in there. And that's when the magical stew starts bubbling and your recipe comes to fruition.
But when you talk about uh, like Sasquatch and
Mhm.
werewolves, they all come back from thousands of years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
Folklore, and the Indians had used to swap food with them.
Yeah. Yeah. They called them the Watchers of the Woods. Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of like, in the Bible verse says there's nothing new under the sun. There really isn't. You go back and you look at, the stuff we're experiencing today. I can even, take UFOs. You can go back and read old accounts of, flying castles and things like that. People were experiencing this. Uh, non-human intelligences. Go back and you read stories about ghosts or the jinn, or some of these other non-human intelligences. Cryptids. You know, the various sacred and secular books, historically have all kinds of fantastical creatures in them, which are various types of cryptids. So, the world has always been just a crazy, weird place. It's just now that after the Industrial Revolution, we kind of, we don't want to hear about the weird. That we can't quantify the weird. So we're just going to pretend like it doesn't happen. And now here we are in the new century. For those of us that are old, that were born in the last century. And I'm not talking about you, Bob. Don't get your feelings hurt. Now in the 21st century, this stuff is becoming a little bit more mainstream. It's becoming a little bit more acceptable to start talking about that. And I'm really excited, cautiously excited. I have to put that caveat in there about potential disclosure. Because that's something that I've been interested ever since I was a wee lad. UFOs and
Yeah.
aliens and stuff like that. So, this is becoming a little more mainstream. So now maybe if there is some sort of bombshell, revelation out there, maybe the powers that hold this information will look and say, everybody's ready to hear it. It's not going to cause a societal collapse, a existential collapse. Maybe people are ready to hear it, and maybe I'll get to see that in my lifetime.
I think there's more people coming to terms with it now.
Yeah, I
Like
think so.
years ago, did ever, but a lot of people say, "Yeah, I've seen something years ago, but I didn't want to say out because I'll get ridiculed."
Yeah, I
But
think it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, now you have military people saying, "Yeah, I've seen A, B, or C." Where back when I was in the military, you just didn't do that. You didn't mention it. You just kept your mouth shut.
yeah, because your job, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
And will Trump say something this year? Maybe.
Yeah, I'm hearing some rumbling, so we'll just, we'll keep our fingers crossed that, something comes out of this.
Oh yeah, and people start talking about, but I think these alien crafts, some as big as motherships, will appear in big cities around the world, and somebody's got to say something about it then, where thousands of people will see these crafts.
Yeah, that less disclosure, voluntary disclosure, that's what it would take, is something that is just so absolutely undeniable that it's like, okay, you can't explain away, this, 2 mile wide, floating obelisk, above, Buenos Aires or wherever, you need to tell us what's going on. So, hopefully it won't, isn't going to take something that dramatic, but, I personally, for me, some of the stuff I've seen that's been, vouched for and authenticated by the U.S. Department of Defense and others, I am absolutely 100% convinced there are objects, and I'm just going to say objects, that fly and move in ways that are contrary to our understanding of physics, our understanding of aeronautics, and our understanding of the way a three-dimensional world works, which is, to me, is proof positive that there is something else out there. Now, is it, our little green friends hopping in their intergalactic Cadillac and driving over here from Zeta Reticuli? I don't know. I don't know if it's, a machine like we think of a machine. That's something I think we have to be really careful of, is trying to put our understanding on something that clearly is outside of our understanding. I think we need to maybe not think of machines and organics and things like that quite the way we are basically been taught, that maybe those are definitions that don't exist in this extra dimension. Maybe it's all of those, or maybe it's none of those. Like I said before, it's possible to be completely right and also be completely wrong at the same time. So,
but do you think some of these craft, what we see, our own?
Yeah, I do think that about probably 90% of the things that are seen, that people see, are either identified and acknowledged or unacknowledged airframes, i.e., they're aircraft. Like I also do, I'm a MUFON investigator, so I also do that. And there's so many of those that I can trace right back to an airplane that was glowing in the sky because it was very high in altitude. The sun was very low on the horizon, illuminating the side of the aircraft. And at the angle, you couldn't see the wings. I do a lot of those cases. Probably 90% of my cases are identified. I do think that the U.S. government, probably the UK, Russia, China, all of your advanced nations, are flying aircraft that are unacknowledged airframes, i.e., they are aircraft or aircraft-like machines that are classified, usually used for what they call ISR work, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. A declassified version of that is SR-71 Blackbird. Everybody knows about that, the U-2 spy plane. Satellites that were, even when I got in the military, that were classified that are now declassified. I think there's a lot of that, especially around test areas like Tampa Air Base in the U.S., Area 51, those kind of places that fly a lot of classified airframes. So then you've got about 3%, like a little tiny little bit, that's truly unexplained. And, when you start getting very advanced sensor systems, like off of F-18 Hornet fighters, that are infrared, visual, radar, and you get these empirical signatures, from various aspects, it's kind of hard to dismiss that. And I think that's what's going to be a lot of the stuff if we do have disclosure. It's going to be a lot of stuff that was recorded by military sensors, be they satellite-based, aircraft-based, ground-based, whatever, that are going to be pretty hard to deny. So, I think that but that 3% is so damn juicy. I mean, it's just so compelling. I think it's going to blow our socks off.
I bet it will as well. It will blow our socks off as well. Because we all want to know You know, there's still people out there saying, "What a load of rubbish you're talking about."
I hope that it, comes out to be, something really cool so I can go, I told you so. I told you so. Uh-huh. I, people, I remember back when the famous Go Fast and gimbal videos were released by Department of Defense. And I was at work, and I don't know if your listeners remember, I used to, retired out of the Department of Defense. I ran the intelligence and security management uh, shop at a big, or we call an organic industrial facility, a big military factory kind of place, right?
Yeah.
So I was the intel guy there, and I had a lieutenant colonel. We had a vestibule. You couldn't just, since we were intel shop, you couldn't just walk into our building. So he called me from the vestibule and he goes, "Hey Trey, this is so and so and so and so." He says, I want to talk. So usually when this colonel comes over to talk, it's like, "Oh man, it's something bad." I said, "Well, okay." I said, "I'll come let you in and we can go to my office." He goes, No, no. He goes, "Let's go out to the little pavilion, little gazebo behind your building and talk." And I'm like, "Oh man, this is
Oh,
bad. This is
no.
bad.
Yeah,
This is this is bad, bad, bad." So I go out there and we sit down, and he's a friend of mine, and we're chit chatting. And he goes, "Hey," he goes, "You've seen the I'm sure you've seen the videos that have been released, in the national news of the object that the F-18 fighter pilots captured, over the Pacific Ocean." I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, what do you think about that?" I said, "Well, give you my opinion." I said, "Here you have naval aviators that have most likely advanced degrees in aeronautics. A lot of your U.S. military pilots have either bachelor's or master's degrees in aeronautics. They're aeronautical engineers.
yeah,
You put them in one of the most advanced airframes out there, an F-18 Hornet. Then you equip that Hornet with some of the most advanced sensors, radar, infrared, etc. And they see something that they cannot identify. They see something that flies in a way that defies physics as they understand them. It basically causes their jaw to hit the floor." I said, "When you take all of that together and you look at it, what's the answer?" And he looked at me very seriously and he goes, "They're real, aren't they?" And I said, "Yeah, I've known that for years. So I think that's where we're at. They're real." And one of the things, especially with some of this quantum analysis done by Stephen Leah, something that we've come up with is not only are we not alone, we are never alone. They are always with us,
mm.
just on the other side of our dimension, all around us at all times. And that's going to be, if that is part of the information that comes out, I think that's going to be kind of scary to some people, that they are all around us. They're within us. They're the fabric of our reality. And there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah. I think, well, to me, I think aliens are walk amongst us.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I know I spent some time in Europe last year, and there were definitely some alien-like people walking around there. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah, but yeah, I was in Croatia. There's definitely some aliens there. But yeah, it's I think that they've always been here. I think that they are.
Do you think we are part alien ourselves then?
I think if you look at things, if you look at it from that perspective, that they are part of the nature of their being is so intertwined with our reality that they are with us, within us, around us all the times. Yeah, we're part of that, and they're part of us. And I think it's you can't separate the two, and that starts to get into some really weird interdimensional, kind of things. Like, can you be outside of a dimension but yet be part of it? And and there's some things that happen on a micro scale, a quantum scale, and if you extrapolate that, why could that not happen on a macro scale? Maybe not in this dimension, but maybe in another dimension. And it starts to get gets kind of weird, when you start looking at things that way. And that goes back to, talking about having a belief system. I think, I think you have to have something that kind of keeps you grounded, because you can get kind of wigged out by this.
Another question here. Does Trey think we should surrender to the aliens when they reveal themselves? Does Trey think we should surrender?
Well, that goes back. Is it an adversarial type reveal? Not every contact is adversarial, nor should it be. My experience, with these non-human intelligences has not been adversarial. If anything, it's been more curious. Then, if whether to surrender or not, I would have to, go back and put my military hat on and saying, what are their forces? What are our forces? What are our chances of success? What are their chances of success? I'd have to try to do intelligence preparation of the battlefield to figure out what their assets are, their weapons are, their abilities to negatively influence us. And then that would be a strategic decision to surrender or not. It might be one of those things where the guy is standing over the anthill with his size 13 boot. Do the ants surrender? Or does it even matter? Is that boot going to come down whether we like it or not?
I think sometimes when, like, we've been at Benton, and we could be there 6 months without seeing anything, and all of a sudden they will appear, and you think, they're just appearing. They know we are seeing them, and they'll show 1 light, 2 light, 3 light, 4 light, 5 light, 6 light, and they'll disappear, and then they'll come over a bit this way. And you think, they know we're watching them.
Yeah. And the question is why? Are they just kind of playing with us? Do they have a playful nature? Are they showing off? Are they trying to communicate? Yeah, I don't know.
Just
I don't
makes you
know.
wonder.
Yeah, and that's why some of our recent experiments have been more into the the more mindscape. Using, like I mentioned several times, the God helmet. We also use some other instrumentation, like the Estes equipment and stuff like that to facilitate communications. And that might be where we finally make contact, is using some of these more esoteric means of communication.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And it just makes you wonder, but we'll wait and see what's going to happen this year.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited. So,
I am. I'm looking forward to it. I just want to, be at Benton when it happens.
Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, sit there and hear it on your radio right when it's disclosure. Then just kind of see if a show happens. Like in Close Encounters. That would be neat.
Come and show us now. It probably will do up there.
Yeah.
So we're just about run out of time.
Okay.
Thank you for coming on the show. It's been lovely as always.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
I've enjoyed that tonight.
Likewise.
Yeah. And my guest next week is, where are we? Oh, it's Greg Little next week. Next Wednesday, the 4th of March, it's Greg Little. I've interviewed him, but I think that's about 4 years ago. So he'll probably have another book out by then. But thank you again. Have a good, lovely weekend.
Yeah, you too.
Get out there and investigate as usual.
As long as God gives me the ability to get out there and, take a look at what's happening, I'll be out there.
Fantastic. And thank you for everybody in the chat room for the questions as well. It's been very interesting as usual. Another great guest. Well, thank you again.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Let's turn this off.